Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Personally, what stood out for me yesterday was, again, when you talk about conventional morality and how really it takes long years to alter our consciousness. It's like we keep going back to that by default, this conventional morality. And you once again reminded us that what Baba is asking us is to emphasize on our identity, that I am a peaceful, loving, pure, powerful being of light. And so from this identity would stem my behavior. Otherwise, we develop or we have an attitude of a holier than thou, and it actually triggers one to perform negative karma. So to start the day 2 of these sessions, I will read out the write-up that you sent for today. You had the best possible foundation, and now you are out in the world. Many are aware of being out there in the world, having been prepared, trained, taught the most incredible, amazing information that only a handful were destined to carry. Each one must make his or her choices and carry the message. Baba had said, "You are the message." How will you carry that message? Your vibration, the look in your eyes, your immense calm in the face of confusion and distress. Allow the world to see and feel that you are carrying something precious yet mysterious. You are the holder of invisible diamonds. You have a direct connection to the source. He will direct those who remain connected. They will receive the signals and carry out whatever is needed quietly, calmly, and invisibly, like angels. You have stepped beyond your roles, indifferent to whatever has happened, because now something quite different is happening. Everything is going on in the mind space. Your steady vibrations of undifferentiated love and detachment relieve pain, soothe distress, and spread calm and peace. The various prophecies unfold in their own time, and the world goes through its changes as it must. You become the detached observer, the witness. You fade away when it is time, leaving a trace of stillness. Om Shanti.
Yes. I think what we need to be aware about, which I think came through in that those words that you were quoting, that we have to be very clear about what happens to us when we are under the influence of preconceptions. And one of the things that is a problem is that you, as a BK student, teacher, still hold various assumptions which inform how you respond, react, and interpret what's going on. For example, you may have an assumption that all the BK, especially those who are older than you in Gyan, more senior than you in the ranking in the organization, you have an assumption that they are all soul conscious and they're all motivated by the ideals that you yourself hold. And it's not necessarily so. So I think one of the things we have to do is a reality check. And that is that we need to be what is called a good judge of character. And we need to be able to detect where someone is coming from. If someone is coming from a place of soul consciousness, connectedness with God, and they are interacting with you from that space, you can feel it. And if a person has reverted to some body conscious vibration or mentality or ego or something like this, you can detect that also. And what that means is, because every single person who is in this practice of Raj Yoga, every single person is flipping between soul consciousness and body consciousness all the time. And if you look at your own self and you evaluate yourself or try to detect how much time you spend in soul consciousness, how much time you spend in body consciousness, and you will find that most of the time you're in body consciousness, and occasionally when you're attentive, then you become soul conscious. And you also need to realize that the same applies to pretty much everyone else. These assumptions that we have are connected with our culture, and they're also connected with our backgrounds and our being under the influence of different conventions, including conventional morality. So these assumptions are connected with the way in which we are socialized. So every human being is socialized by their parents, educators, and religious leaders in whatever culture they are born into. And as far as I can tell, almost all cultures operate on the basis of the patriarchal system. And the patriarchal system ranks people that the highest are the males, white, wealthy, privileged, and the lowest are female, without money, uneducated, limited, and so on. And there's a big spectrum in between, and all of us fall somewhere in that spectrum. And according to where we fall in the spectrum, the way we are socialized causes us to diminish ourselves in our own estimation, or to raise ourselves up above what we really are in our own estimation. And this is one of the definitions of body consciousness. Because body consciousness doesn't really have anything to do with being conscious of the fact that you have a body. It's much more subtle than that. It's to do with culture, very much to do with culture, very much to do with patriarchal system, and very much to do with the fact that your sense of identity is based upon how the people of authority in your culture view you, and they give you your identity according to what is convenient for them, but it doesn't have much to do with what is real or true. Then we come into Gyan and we begin to study about soul consciousness. We start to practice soul consciousness, and we interpret it according to the way we get socialized in Gyan. So there is another kind of socialization that happens because you are in Gyan in the context of the BK family, the BK organization, and so on. So when you come into this, you become a Brahma Kumar or Kumari. And I'm assuming that almost everyone would have read and or heard the Avyakt Murli of today. This is Sunday, October 2nd. And in that, you would have noticed that Baba talked about how he has given us, to everybody, equally the same information, but some people know how to apply it in their practical circumstances, and some people just don't get it, and they don't know how to apply it. And because of that, the treasures that he's giving cannot be used, or are not being used, to enrich yourself and to bring yourself to the level and the sense of self that corresponds to who you are. And so this is an internal conflict which a lot of people are really not aware about. And the extent to which you are under the influence of your socialization determines the extent to which you are aware of how it diminishes you or puts you up. So one of the definitions of ego is that you have a superiority or inferiority complex. There's a kind of dated way of looking at it, but it's quite a good way of looking at it. And so your socialization plays a huge role as to whether you have an inferiority or superiority complex. And it really doesn't have as much to do with you as to do with your socialization. And most people don't know this. And it is never said in any of the BK teachings. And so the assumption is that it doesn't exist. Actually, it does exist. Some people simply deny that it exists, and most people are just plain unaware. And I think that a very important aspect of our teachings is to become aware of things that are invisible, because then you can take them into consideration. So what I also saw in this Murli, which I think is very relevant to our study here and our investigation and explorations of Gyan and Yoga, is that he said you must invest in yourself. And what does that mean? When he says some of you don't know how to apply the treasures in your life, and some people do, you can understand that it means some people really know how to invest in themselves and bring themselves to the level that Baba is teaching us for. And he's talking about status or rank. Everyone is familiar with the expression number wise. And I think most of you would be aware that Baba, Brahma Baba, used to, in the early days, try to rank everyone, because there was the awareness about a rosary. So there is said to be a rosary of 8 and a rosary of 108, and the rosary of 16,108, and then the big rosary of 900,000. And these rosaries represent people and their ranking. So people come into Gyan and they have a number, and they don't know what that number is. Nobody knows what that number is. But in practical situations, when you arrive in Gyan, just as when you arrive in any employment or traditional gathering, you start at the very bottom and you work your way up. So the BK organization in many ways is modeled on the traditional business mode, which was there in the 1920s. This was what the community that Brahma Baba came from was. It was a business community. And I think it is realistic to say that most of the people who are in charge of centers in different places all over the world have a business background. That means to say they come from families, business families, or in India from the business caste or community. And so there are sanskaras of being in the consciousness of doing business. And sanskaras is not just the karma that you do, which creates an impression and that creates a tendency in you. That's one interpretation of the word sanskaras that we're used to. But more than that, sanskaras refers to your socialization. So whichever community a person is born into, the family, the educators, and the religious authorities will talk to you about who you are, and that will give you the sanskaras. So in that sense, sanskaras and socialization is the same thing. It's identical. And then above and beyond that, you have your own individual personality traits. But the socialization is a very, very big influence and is hardly ever talked about in Gyan, but it's actually quite important to factor it in, because whether something is good or bad, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're aware of it. Like, I'll give you an example. Some people say lying is bad, you shouldn't lie, and they don't like it if they found somebody lied to them and they got deceived. Okay, that's normal. But in Gyan, you wouldn't really deal with it that way. Yes, you would know that truth is better than untruth, definitely. But the thing is, if somebody has lied to you, the onus is on you to know whether they're telling you the truth or not. Because it's up to you whether or not you get deceived. So they may want to deceive you, that's their karma, but your karma is, did you get deceived, or did you pick it up and not get deceived? So this is more what we need to work with. So that means we need to understand the socialization that takes place in people who may be of a different culture from yourself. And there are some forms of socialization that are across the board because the patriarchal system is pretty much across the board in all the cultures. But in some it's more intense, in some cultures it's less intense. In some it's more abusive, in others it's less abusive, but it's there right across the board. And Gyan is a system which is not patriarchal in the way that the patriarchal system of the world is going on, because a soul is genderless and ageless, and doesn't have a class or a caste or a religion or any of those things. A soul is a being, a human soul. And then when that soul comes into the body by incarnating, you're born into a context. Now, all of us are in the confluence age, and the confluence age is a different set of principles, a different set of concepts, a different way from what's going on in the Iron Age. And these two are superimposed on each other, and they are coexisting. They're like parallel universes which bleed into each other. And mostly it's the Iron Age that bleeds into the confluence age. And this is why Shiv Baba talks to us every day to kind of wash away the bleeding effect of the influence of the Iron Age, which keeps on, coming in all the time and pulling you back to itself. So this is our context, and we need to be very aware that it's constant. And even if you are inside a center and you don't go out, and you are in a BK uniform, and you are really separated visually and physically from the Iron-Aged world, even so, the influence of the socialization of the Iron-Aged world is gigantic. And you cannot protect yourself from it by dressing up differently or living a life which is very different in terms of activities from the regular world. We have to do it internally. And so this is what I want to focus on today. So socialization is also connected with culture. And one thing I would like to bring into or bring onto the table is the concept of something called work creep. And some of you may have heard of this, but many of you may not. So work creep is something that we do see in the environment of the BK world. And this is why I wanted to bring it in. There was quite a lot of research going on this at the moment, and there was an article in the BBC about it in the last few days. Work creep means that you do more than what you are supposed to do. And when you do that, you get a lot of approval and your ratings go up. And so this reward that you experience for doing more than you're supposed to do, or more than is expected of you, or more than is balanced, more than is reasonable, causes you to get very out of balance and burn out. So this is something that many people do experience in the BK world, especially those who are living in centers, because there is an intensification of expectations. And you hear things like you have to conquer sleep, don't rest, get up early, stay up late, and so there are many people who experience sleep deprivation because of how they interpret the different recommendations, suggestions, demands even, to work continuously and endlessly. So what this is doing is eating away at people's yoga. And even though Baba says quite often that you must keep in balance, and you must have a balance between yoga and karma, you must have a balance between yoga and study, and there are quite a lot of people who want to do more yoga, several hours a day yoga, and they often get told that you're supposed to work, you're supposed to be doing this, that, and the other. You can't just sit around meditating. You have to be meditating while you're doing the work, and so on. So all of this is something that we have seen and experienced, and it's kind of normal. But yet there are a lot of BKs getting burnout. There are a lot of BKs who are unable to have good quality meditation because they're tired all the time. And I think that some of this is connected with the variations between the cultures. So if you are a person who comes from the business caste in India, and you slip easily into the position of looking after a center, because sometimes Baba calls it Baba's shop, and you are dealing in jewels of knowledge, and you have customers and they come, and you must be awake and aware and fulfill the needs of the customers and all this. So there's very much that business feel about it, and when everybody is awake and alert and doing all these things, then the business runs very nicely. You do a lot of advertising, you bring in a lot of people, you serve them, and everything gets more and more prosperous. So that's good, but it easily gets out of balance. And so I think one of the things we're looking at today is, in the context of all the changes that I mentioned about yesterday, let us see if what we're doing is sustainable, if it is balanced, if we can continue like this, or if we need to do any rebalancing of the wheels of business. One of the things that does come up is the matter of exploitation. And if you do your spiritual practice in a context of a business model, the matter of exploitation is definitely something to be aware about. Because if somebody is being used to work in an imbalanced way, that could be called exploitation. And then how do you protect yourself against falling into traps of being expected to do stuff which puts you out of balance, and not notice that it's actually up to you to say no or to set boundaries? And I think one of the problems is the word haji, and I think the context for that is that there are preconceptions and assumptions I think especially in the world of India, that people are fundamentally lazy. And if you go to any Indian, like the people who work for the government, who look after archives and the bureaucracy of India. And I had quite many occasions to do that. And what you find in India is that all this bureaucratic work takes forever. And the reason is because the people who work for the government cannot be fired. whether they work or not. They always draw their pay, and whether they do their work or not doesn't actually matter. And so they don't. And you will find large numbers of people sitting around doing absolutely nothing, with piles of work accumulating which they don't attend to. And so this has given rise to an assumption that everybody is lazy. And it is quite normal in human society that if everybody's lazy, then I'm going to be lazy too, because I'm not going to be the only one who works, and be some kind of dodo and get exploited. No. So it creates a culture of laziness and of assuming that everybody else is lazy. And so Baba definitely has to deal with a whole bunch of people who don't want to do anything. They just want to sit around and enjoy being taken care of by Baba and go to heaven without lifting a finger. And so there is quite a lot of elements in the BK world to counteract this thing. Now, if you put that into the Western world, it's a different culture. And in many parts of the Western world, especially North America, Northern Europe, there is a work ethic culture. And so anybody who grows up in a culture where there is the work ethic, there's nothing like laziness. People do gain their sense of self from accomplishment. They believe in meritocracy, that if you work hard in school, you work hard in work, you gain your position, your rank through working hard. And even this has created the situation of work creep, where people are getting burned out, exploited, because the world of work is very, very competitive. Unemployment is high and getting higher. We're in a time of inflation, and people are very much socialized to be as competitive as possible. And your value is determined by how much money you've got, how much power and influence you've got. And of course, this also facilitates corruption. And you do hear a lot about corruption in India, so that if somebody wants any bureaucratic work done, then they have to grease the wheels by giving bribes. And there's just a great deal that operates on the basis of bribes. Now you translate that into the Western world, where there is not so much a culture of bribery. There is, to some quite large extent, in the highest echelons, but among the lower echelons, it's really not so evident at all. Then you combine that with the influence of religious socialization. And in religious socialization in the Christian world, you do get people who believe that they are sinners and they have to be redeemed. And then you mix that with the emphasis on purity, on not doing bad actions, and so on. And so you actually amplify these feelings of guilt and shame and so on that are laid down in the socialization of people who grow up in religious environments, where this type of diminishment of people is quite common. So when you mix all these things into Gyan, you need to really be careful about what's going to happen if you don't separate these elements and really determine what Gyan is really all about and what the confluence age is really all about, and how you function as a confluence aged Brahmin Raj Yogi in a context that is Iron Aged, where all the people who are Raj Yogis are to some extent under the influence of their socialization that comes from the Iron Age. So this is a very tricky one, because you have to have an incredibly well-developed power of discernment or discrimination to be able to detect what is going on in the interactions that you have with other people, especially if they come from cultures that are different from yours. The tendency is to, what's the expression? To give the benefit of the doubt. So part of your consciousness will say, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't seem right, something's going on here that I'm not familiar with, and I'm assuming this person is motivated by the highest motivations, but it doesn't feel like it. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt and go along with it. This is really where the trouble comes in. And so you give the benefit of the doubt, and as you do that, the intensity of the problem will increase until you get to a point where you say, there is no doubt. So I'm not going to give the benefit of the doubt because there isn't any doubt. I am interacting with a person who's operating not on the basis of Gyan and yoga, but on the basis of vices and arrogance and the attitude of diminishing me or wanting to use me, exploit me, etc. So standing up for yourself needs to kick in. I think many people allow the benefit of the doubt to go far beyond where it needs to go. And then it becomes very difficult to stand up for yourself, because if you do stand up for yourself after not standing up for yourself for a long, long time, there's going to be pushback, and you are going to be punished or sidelined, or people will speak badly about you. They will say that you are very body conscious and that you, etc., etc. And so this is a reality that is going on. And partly it's because of socialization, partly it's because of cultures that don't mix together, that don't understand each other, and with an attitude that there is no such thing as cultural differences. No, there are cultural differences, many cultural differences. And it's just very important to factor it in. Because when you factor it in, then you don't have to give the benefit of the doubt when there is no doubt. If you factor it in, you're able to detect what is really going on, as opposed to what you are led to believe is going on, which is different. So it becomes very important to value yourself. And I think the point in today's Murli about investing in yourself is very important. Now, if you look at the Murli, you will not find this expression, invest in yourself, but it's in there in different language, different words. It, in many ways, corresponds to one of the parables that you find in the Christian Bible, which is called the parable of the talents. And this parable exists across the board of the various different religions. So the parable is called the parable of the talents, and you have a father who has some talents, and talents is another word for money. And so he gives to his 3 sons the same amount of talents. This corresponds to Baba giving the knowledge to all of us equally. Now, one of his sons hid it away so that nothing would happen to it and it would be safe. Another of the sons squandered it and lost it all. And the third one invested it and applied it and became very prosperous. And then that one received the praise from the father. So this is really what Baba is saying in this Murli, that I have given you everything, you know everything, you need to understand who you are. Because all the people in the world who have various high rank and high status are nothing in comparison with you, because you are deity souls. So you have been in the world for the whole 5,000 years, and those people have arrived after the Copper Age, so they don't know anything about Golden Age, Silver Age. And you came into the Golden Age and Silver Age every cycle. You were given birth, spiritual birth, by God, and he gave you treasures. But you're number wise because some of you understand how to use the treasures and others of you don't. Some of you just keep it away for a rainy day, and you think that, oh, it will create my fortune at the end. Some of you squander it and mix it up with good karma, bad karma, not understanding, and everything gets lost. So what he wants us to do is really understand who we are and to apply the treasures. One interesting sentence he gave in the Murli today is, you are the ones who, if you get your fortune now, you get it at the end. If you don't apply your talents and create your fortune now, it's not going to come at the end. So what this means is you need to really know how to operate in a world where there are many, many influences of the Iron Age culture, what I generally call conventional morality. You really have to distinguish what's going on at any given moment so that you are victorious moment by moment and stand up for yourself and recognize who you are and function in a very complex context in order to arrive at the destination, which is that you are karmatit, that you have enriched yourself fully with Gyan and yoga, and that you command respect in the Brahmin community, and that you are able to operate in a very harmonious way. You do not accept anybody putting you up, and you definitely don't accept anyone putting you down. And you come to understand who you are, who everyone else is, and how to interact harmoniously. This is very difficult because the power of discrimination is insufficient, it's not refined enough, And I remember there was one Murli, I can't remember at all what date it was, but I do remember that Murli in which Baba said, if you don't have anything, but you have a good power of discernment, you will be successful. So I will stop there and let me turn it over to Sister Rose, and I'm happy to hear your questions and comments. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti, Sister Denise. A pause before we open the floor for Q&A.
Let us just turn within for a moment and think about how free am I from my socialization. Usually not too much, but it's increasing. It's as if there are at least two of you inside your being. The confluence-aged soul-conscious self and the unaware iron-aged body-conscious self. This practice of yoga, study of Gyan, makes me more aware, more soul-conscious. Come into that state of awareness. Let go of the past. No regrets. No if only. Just let it be. Come in the present. Be with the self. The rest of your life begins right now. Be soul conscious. Be aware. Who am I? A deity soul who forgot the self completely. Now, gradually awakening. Who am I? Who is my great influencer? God Himself. Now what will I do with that? How will I use that to invest in myself and become the fulfillment of what He wants for me?
Sister Denise, once again, very precious and timely reminder of truth that you just shared.